Welcome to Worth Your Time with your hosts from the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom Show, Kristi Lee, and the president and CEO of the Indianapolis Zoo, Dr. Rob Shumaker. Our mission to inform, entertain, and educate with guests from all aspects of life. We guarantee there isn't another podcast that features two hosts with such different backgrounds and discussions with remarkable people doing exceptional things. So let's get started. Here are your hosts, Kristi Lee and Dr. Rob Shumaker.
We're back, Dr. Rob.
We're back in our palatial new studio.
Yes, we haven't been thrown off the air yet.
I love this studio.
I do too. Thank you, our producer, Chris Bengal. You've put together a nice little piece of property here.
It's fantastic. It's exactly what a podcast studio should look like.
And since we're not on video, you can't imagine it, but there's plants and there's a couch and I get to sit in a chair like I am the therapist and Dr. Rob is my client.
A big... Should I sit? Can I'm laying down on the couch. I'll sit up.
No, you're not.
I like the fantastic exposed brick wall and beautiful wall of plants. It's fantastic. I love it.
Good job. It's very comforting. We're going to talk about chimpanzees today. We don't have a special guest because you are going to be the special guest because you're an international expert on great apes. And so this is right up your alley. You also, of course, the president of the Indianapolis Zoo, where you have just opened a brand new, one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art chimpanzee exhibit.
It's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. But we want to talk about chimpanzees as a whole, not just the exhibit.
Absolutely.
There's a wonderful book called Chimpanzee Politics that a lot of people are familiar with. Not to open on a sad note, but we were going to have Frans on the show. But at his advanced age, God didn't see that.
Here's what happened. Chimpanzee Politics came up when we started doing this podcast as one of the books that changed everything for me in terms of my perspective. And the author is a guy named Frans de Waal, and was a wonderful, wonderful man, great researcher, phenomenal scientist, and a really good friend and colleague of mine. I really, really enjoyed him. And I reached out to see, and he responded on email and said, I can't right now. I'm having some medical issues. And shockingly, died not too long after that. And what an unbelievable loss. But I'm really happy to be honoring his incredible work to kick off by talking about this book. So Chimpanzee Politics is this phenomenal book that Frans de Waal wrote. It's not new. Originally published in 1982, but it's been revised a number of times.
But still holds up.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
I just read it within the last 6 months.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
I've lost track of how many times I read it, and then when I was teaching, both with undergraduates and graduates, I used to use it as a textbook, even though it's not. It is, so I guess I should say what it is, right?
Yes.
It helps if someone hasn't read it. So when Frans was in graduate school, he's Dutch, and when he was in graduate school, he studied a group of chimpanzees at the Arnhem Zoo in the Netherlands, and the book is basically a narrative about everything that occurred in this colony of chimpanzees. And today, that does not sound very unusual, does not sound very surprising as a style of book. But oh man, I think it was really the first book ever that looked at chimpanzees in this way. Now, there were other great books out that talked about individual chimpanzees, but to chronicle the lives of a relatively small community of chimpanzees like that was groundbreaking. And I would say I was young when I read it, just out of high school, but I would say that I thought I knew a lot about great apes. I thought I had what would I say? That I really admired them. I was really amazed by them. That was all true. But when I read this book, it changed everything for me. Really portrayed these chimpanzees, I should put it in present tense because you can still buy it, of course. It portrays these chimpanzees as complex thinking individuals with social goals and ambition. The subtitle is Chimpanzee Politics, Power and Sex Among Apes. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And one of the tidbits about this, and this is going back into the 80s, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House years and years ago,
of course,
bought this book and required everyone in Congress to read it and distribute it to everybody in Congress. And it resonated so strongly, and it's been translated in multiple languages, resonated so strongly around the world from the political perspective and political aspect of it, because people saw themselves reflected in it so much. And what that really did, to bring it back to chimpanzees, is it revolutionized how people looked at chimpanzees. Nobody thought of them in this way until this book came out and read it. Thought of them in general public or general knowledge.
Humans.
Yeah, and it's a book for the general.
Humanizes a chimpanzee.
Yeah, and it's for a general read. It is not a textbook. It's not a scientific book in any way. It reads like a drama.
And the thing that is probably most stunning, especially for those of you who are not familiar with the book or not familiar with the way chimpanzees are portrayed in zoos usually, this particular colony of chimpanzees lived on an island that was 2 acres,
That's right.
open air.
Yeah.
It almost as close to the wild as you could probably get
close.
with animals being in captivity.
Yeah, pretty close. And it was just, they lived out there, and of course visitors could observe them.
From across a moat, by the way. You couldn't get that close. I don't want people to think. Yeah.
It was a remarkable setup, a truly innovative exhibit designed for its day.
Is it still there?
It's still there, absolutely. And truly innovative to have a group of, and by the way, it was a group, it wasn't just Frans, a group of really talented Dutch researchers from a great tradition of primatology in the Netherlands, by the way, studying these chimpanzees. And it certainly revolutionized my understanding and others. So I can't recommend the book highly enough, and it has been updated a number of times, and sadly there will be no more updates because Frans de Waal passed away. But
he was in his 90s, is that correct?
I don't know. He was much younger than that.
Oh, I'm confusing him with someone
So he was
else.
retired, but sadly died way too young.
Very sad.
And anyway, I would strongly encourage anyone to do it. It will revolutionize what you might think, what you might know about chimpanzees, because, as you say so correctly, Kristi, still, even today, the way chimpanzees are portrayed in the media or in the news, entertainment in the news, so on, is usually so inaccurate, so poor, so
What are some of those inaccuracies? Can you show us a couple of examples?
I have to remember that things are definitely changing for the better, but it's still out there. You can find chimpanzee shows or movies that portray chimpanzees as pets, or most often for comic relief. Or the phrase that I use a lot is often chimpanzees are portrayed as degenerate humans. Now, I want to make a really huge distinction, because maybe people are thinking about it right now. I'm not talking about the new Planet of the Apes movies. That's all.
We have to talk about that in a whole separate conversation.
And that's all CGI, which is a whole different story. But in the past, when people used chimpanzees in entertainment, it never benefited chimpanzees. It was always negative. And then, of course, you get the outrageous situations when chimpanzees are in really odd circumstances in private ownership, or really unfortunate situations, and it's reported on when they do something horrible and that people regret. It's not really a surprise when you create such a difficult circumstance for that animal, but that's where the focus is on. So I think what's really important is to shift that focus, and any single event can be sensationalized. We can do that with human behavior every single day on the news. It does happen.
Yeah.
But we don't think that every human is that. So we need to stop portraying chimpanzees as a stereotype, because they're not. They're as interesting and complex and individual as you could possibly imagine. And that's what Chimpanzee Politics, the book, does. But by the way, there was a wonderful series recently on Netflix. Chimpanzee Empire.
Yes.
That's the name, Chimpanzee Empire.
It was great.
It was great. And the footage was some of the best I've ever seen. I thought it was absolutely remarkable. That really portrayed individuals, which is great. By the way, if you go back and read a little bit more about the making of that, it is a long-term study site, and the way they were portrayed was based on years and years of scientists studying them and knowing them and being able to provide really good, reliable information about them. I love that.
Made me cry.
There's some tough things about
Yeah,
it.
there are some really tough scenes in that. It's.
Life is.
I know.
Life is tough.
To look through Kristi's rose-colored glasses. I know it doesn't always be that way, but
it's interesting that you say that because I think a lot of times, I don't mean you, but I think a lot of times when we talk about animals, we don't want to focus on the realities that, and let me put it in maybe a more positive spin. If you want to have a really full, rich, normal life that's gives you everything, some of it's really hard.
yeah, that's true. You're
and that's
right.
true for every human. If you protect yourself from everything, you are not living a full life. And you are not living a real life, in my view.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Hopefully it's mostly good, but there's a lot of hard stuff. And that's just as true
With the chimpanzee
with
world.
chimpanzees. And I think that's super healthy, actually. I don't think it's never fair to in this case, chimpanzees, to think there's something wrong with their life if they experience bad things. Any more than wrong with my life or your life or anyone else's when you experience bad things. It happens. It's normal. And it helps you be resilient and hopefully helps you appreciate all the good things in your life. I think that's true for chimpanzees too. They do experience hard things naturally in all circumstances. It's normal. I also think it's healthy.
They do have a lot of joy too.
A lot of joy.
They have
I think
a lot
that
of
puts
joy.
it in perspective. I don't mean to be too heavy about all of it, but I think it's a great way to start the conversation because a lot of times the first thing you hear when people talk about chimpanzees, they're like, oh yeah, they're aggressive. Hold on. They can be aggressive when it's appropriate. And this is the way I always like to portray it. I know you pretty well. And I would say you're about the nicest, kindest, gentlest person anybody could imagine.
Oh, thanks.
I think it's true. But if you're walking down the street by yourself in the middle of the night and somebody comes up behind you and tries to grab your purse or grab whatever, hopefully...
I'm going to go Krav Maga on them. That's what's going to happen.
I hope.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate. And that's normal. And I hope you would.
Sure.
And that has nothing to do with the fact that in life, you're a super kind, gentle person. But in the right circumstance, you shouldn't be. It's the same with chimpanzees. They're not always nice and kind to each other, but it's not just random. It's for a reason. And it is true that chimpanzees do work through issues and work through conflicts with some aggression, but
they reconcile.
They do. Oh,
that
absolutely.
to me is one of the most surprising
Instantly.
things that I have learned about chimpanzees.
And they crave it.
Yeah.
They've got to reconcile when they have a conflict with somebody. So they might have their...
And that's like a hug and a kiss.
Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
unbelievable to
That's
me.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's the thing about chimpanzee behavior. If for people that haven't been around chimpanzees, when you see a nice, healthy, functioning social group, you get what they're doing right away. You don't need an interpreter. And I would really hesitate to say that a lot of times when, people so over or under or misinterpret animal behavior all the time because they're projecting whatever. But when it comes to chimpanzees, I think that happens a lot less because it's pretty clear and it's easy to interpret that amazingly people can do it pretty accurately most of the time, even if you've never been around chimpanzees, because most people have been around other people. and it's not so difficult to make those transitions.
They are very close to us.
Yeah, it's incredible. So this is one of my favorites. I guess it's probably worth saying too, when we talk about chimpanzees, some of the basics. So they're primates, they're great apes. There are only 5 types of great apes, so it's really easy to remember. So there's in order of
Closest to humans?
furthest. So
furthest.
the least
Okay.
so the least closely related
DNA-wise.
DNA-wise are orangutans.
Okay.
And orangutans are the apes that are found only in Southeast Asia, Borneo and Sumatra. And they're the ones that are red or orange hair. live very high in the trees. Males have the big cheek pads.
We're in the movie with Clint Eastwood.
That there is a generation that knows them in the movie with Clint Eastwood.
Sorry.
And if you were not from that generation, if you're younger than that, you know them from the Dunstan movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to come back to that in a minute, by the way, because that's good to talk about.
All right, I'll write that down so
Thank
we
you.
don't forget.
There's the orangutans. Then there are gorillas. There's lowland gorillas and mountain gorillas. Most people are very familiar with gorillas. Chimpanzees, what people used to call pygmy chimpanzees almost 100 years ago, now we call bonobos.
Bonobos.
Orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos. And I said there were 5.
Yes.
Biologically, the 5th is humans. This is what is really remarkable to me. So the closest relationship is chimpanzees and bonobos. They're both considered chimpanzees. They're very closely related, more than 99%, like 99.3% the same in terms of their DNA. Humans are next. So since we're talking about chimpanzees, but this would also be true for bonobos, humans and chimpanzees have 98.4% the same DNA. Wow. 98.4. Here's the piece that I love to bring up because nobody ever forgets it. Humans and chimpanzees are more closely related than chimpanzees and gorillas.
Really?
Yeah, say it again. Humans and chimpanzees are more closely related than chimpanzees and gorillas.
That's incredible.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. So there's another, while we're talking about books, there's another great book that's older called The Third Chimpanzee, and written by the genius Jared Diamond. And really his only book that focused almost entirely on primatology or primate studies in any way. But it's a fantastic book. And he makes the argument in the book that biologically we should group chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans in the same genus, meaning they're all types of chimpanzee. That he would say we are the third chimpanzee in that group. Didn't catch on because people don't like that.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
But biologically, it's...
I've been to the beach. I've seen some. Sorry. There are some people that are hairier than others. I'm sorry.
It is going to take me a minute to recover from that. So
that's why you are on the show with me. I provide this comic relief. You have to giggle.
I thought that was not. I thought that was just a thoughtful observation.
It is a thoughtful observation, but yeah, we are. I mean,
probably,
it's
98.4%. I think, and that's quite remarkable. Same DNA, and what it tells you is how incredibly similar humans and chimpanzees are. It also tells you how important 1.6% of our DNA is.
That's true too.
Of course, we're incredibly similar, but there are some big differences as well. An easy one, we are physically so much more fragile. Chimpanzees are just unbelievably, they're like Olympic athletes in everyday life. They're just
really resilient.
Physically strong, physically capable, physically resilient.
Well, they don't have McDonald's.
Correct.
Oh.
But however, but here's the point. If you just had a chimpanzee living on fast food, which has happened in occasional private ownership cases, they react the same way as you would expect. They
get heavy and
they get very heavy. They get out of shape. They can't do anything. So they have those same effects. Just like us, all primates, great apes in particular, crave the big ones, sugar, fat, and salt.
Sure.
And if you have it to excess, that's okay because we crave it, meaning, okay, we want more. It doesn't mean it's good for us. We are just like chimpanzees in that way, that if we can have way too much sugar, way too much fat, way too much salt, we'll do it because our bodies are programmed to go find it and crave it because it was always very limited ancestrally for us. And
do chimpanzees do that in the wild?
Absolutely.
They do?
Absolutely. So
forage for some like sweeter fruit or...
there are incredible example. Of course, fruit is their number one favorite food, but in the wild, but lots of places where they will break into and take the honey. So there are arboreal beehive nests and subterranean insect nests too they break into, and that involves remarkable tool use as well. So there's a great example, and this is at the Gualogo Triangle Ape Project. This is not the only place where it happens, but incredible footage, incredible documentation. They have a tool called basically a honey pounding club, and they'll get a big, stout, heavy club and use it to break into almost like in those old movies when you would see them breaking down the castle doors with the big breaking down the door by hitting that club against the door. Same thing. They'll use it.
I thought you were going to say a piñata.
Well, no, because they don't use it like a baseball bat. They use it.
They more into it,
almost like
a ramming.
Yeah, they ram it into it. They don't hit it like a piñata. They ram into it to create a hole.
Okay,
and then they use a second tool then to extract the honey, a much smaller tool, or their hands, one or the other. So yeah, they will absolutely go for sweet fruits, absolutely go for honey, but are unique in that they also regularly hunt for meat in the wild. Occasionally, other great apes like orangutans will eat meat in the wild, but it's maybe they find it by chance. They find something by chance. They don't hunt like chimpanzees do. Chimpanzees are really good hunters, and there's good debate, and at least in my view, some good evidence that they also hunt cooperatively, and then they share the meat. So they will share the meat. Males do almost all of the hunting. Not always. There's some populations where females are very skilled hunters too, but in general, males do most of the hunting. Then when they finish the hunt, males share preferentially. They share with the males that participated in the hunt, and they share with preferred females.
Yeah.
Strategic.
Just like men.
back to the
men.
Back to the subtitle of the Chimpanzee Politics books, Power and Sex Among Apes. It's all about who's going to help them with power and where are the opportunities for sex.
I was reading this book and I was thinking about
the Chimpanzee Politics?
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you. Dr. Rob and I are talking. We do not have a special guest because Dr. Rob is our special guest this week, about our colony. We have 21 chimpanzees in Indianapolis at the zoo.
Phenomenal.
In a brand new exhibit that just opened. They had 25 in this particular project in this book.
Yeah.
And I was trying to compare and contrast just from my observations. And it seemed, and maybe I don't see this because I'm not around it as much as you are, these chimpanzees, seems like ours get along better. Is that, do they?
So why?
In the book, it seemed to me like there was quite a bit of power struggle, and we say they have arguments or fights or whatever, but then they reconcile. Do we have that in our colony? Sure. I haven't really noticed that.
Yeah, maybe I'll back up and frame it up just a little bit. So we just opened this brand new, really quite remarkable facility, the Penny and Jack Fortune International Chimpanzee Complex.
Yes.
It's very different because it is not a traditional indoor and outdoor. It's spread throughout about 2/3 of the zoo over many, many, many acres, and multiple indoor locations, multiple outdoor locations, very high climbing locations, and all connected by an elevated trail system. So
it's incredible.
It's incredible. And I think I guess I humbly say, I think it sets a new standard for caring for chimpanzees in a zoo. And I think it's really quite revolutionary. And I'm immensely proud of it.
You should be.
I thank you. And the whole premise is based on the wild. And this was the phrase I didn't use earlier, but I should have. Again, chimpanzees are distinct. Every type of great ape, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and humans all have different social systems, all have different ways of behaving. They're all remarkably distinct. When we talk about chimpanzees live in a community of individuals. That community, in some places in the wild, could be 20 or less individuals, but in other places it could be, there have been documented cases of 150 individuals in a community. And by the way, chimpanzees live in 21 different countries across Africa, all along the equator. Mm-hmm. They defend a territory, and the term, depending on who you read, it's either fission fusion or fusion fission. People use both terms. It is meaning that the community every individual knows every other individual in their community, but they don't stay together. They break apart into these smaller, and it's referred to as parties. Maybe you have a party of 8 individuals or 2 individuals, or somebody goes alone, or 20 individuals. It depends. And that happens daily. They're not permanent association. So it's this kind of constant dynamic social system. And that was our model for how we designed it. So the idea is we need to have a community of chimpanzees. We can accommodate about 30 adults. We currently have 21. And the goal is that they decide where they go, what they do, and who they do it with.
All 21 together in one community.
Together. That's the goal. That's unusual for a zoo to have that many individuals. And there's a whole nother, if you can write it down, we should talk about sanctuaries, because sanctuaries are incredibly important in the U.S. right now for a large number of chimpanzees. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
But for an accredited zoo, that's a very unusual number of chimpanzees, and we're growing. We want to grow that number.
We want to have babies.
We do want to have babies. And for a number of reasons, and this I hope resonates, babies and kids are what bring a social group together.
Yes.
That's what makes things normal. That's what makes things healthy and happy. And not 100% of the time, but it really is.
It is.
Yes,
of course.
It's what makes life work, right?
Yes. And in the book, that's very evident.
Absolutely true.
People taking care of other people's babies. We're talking about not people, chimpanzees taking care of other
this
people's.
happens to me all the time when I'll be talking to somebody who doesn't work at the zoo. And I'll say something like, oh my gosh, I was having a visit with Sue and Bill today, and the best thing happened. And I'll go down the street, and the person will stop and say, wait, are you talking about chimps or people? What are you talking about? Fill me in.
Yeah.
And I forget.
Because they're so closely related to us, and their activities are so similar. And reading about some of the mothers in this particular book who weren't able to have children and then were able to adopt another chimpanzee. That was an amazing story. Or learned how to bottle feed a baby. Yeah. A chimpanzee. I mean,
that's true. And she did.
Yes.
And that brings up a great point, because there are still people who try very hard to find the things that are unique about humans as a way to elevate humans. That's not my thing. My thing is I like finding the connectedness. I like finding what's shared, because every species has something unique. No question. Of course humans have things that are unique.
Sure.
But to just dwell on this, what makes humans unique? To me, it's so uninteresting. I love the shared part. But one of those things, and you can find this among some largely social psychologists, and they will say, well, humans are the only species that adopt unrelated individuals, biologically unrelated individuals. Well, of course we do, but it's nonsense. There are plenty of other species that do that, great apes in particular. And that is illustrated so perfectly in this book. They will absolutely adopt an infant that is not their own and care for it as if it is. A female, an adult female will do that. A little bit different from males in chimpanzee community, because that's one of the interesting things about their communities. There are many males, adult males, that all live together. And so no male ever knows the paternity of any of the offspring, because a female could have bred with any of the males. Males are generally tolerant of offspring.
But they don't have that paternal connection.
Not the same paternal thing.
Like we do.
Or for a great example would be gorillas. Gorillas have an incredible paternal connection with their offspring because they know paternity. Humans, of course, hopefully. And orangutans are an interesting exception to that, because they basically never know paternity. That's not their social life at all. That's not their society. But in general, adult male orangutans are incredibly good to infants and youngsters, incredibly good to them. And they just have such enjoyment being around youngsters, which is unusual because they don't really do that in the wild. So anyway, back to chimpanzees. The whole idea is, if we can give chimpanzees the ability to make those decisions, our expectation is that we will see some changes in their behavior. There's no doubt.
It's already happened.
It has. There is no doubt there will be aggression, because that's a normal thing for chimps. That's how they work out their problem. Now, when I say aggression, it can be screaming, it can be hitting, it can be hair pulling. It doesn't mean big injuries. It means fighting. It means aggression. It doesn't mean injuries, although it can at times. The majority of the time, these are not injuries that require any medical care or any medical treatment. They're minor. It's not a big deal. So when you say,
And then they kiss and make up. Remember that part?
They crave reconciliation.
Yeah.
They absolutely crave it almost immediately after. By the way, that's a great point because, and we've seen this, if there's a fight between two individuals, by the way, females really do fight a lot with each other too.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's a good point because everybody likes to think it's the males. Yeah, males will fight, but females are tough. What'll happen is, and I've seen this myself, you might have two individuals that have a fight and the fight's over, no big injuries, lots of screaming, running around, hair pulling. And then one goes to make up with the other one. And if she gets rejected, the fight starts again.
Ooh.
Because now, man, that's an insult.
Yeah.
If you try and make up and they won't, that's rough, man.
Ooh.
You don't want to do that.
Huh.
You need to make up when somebody offers to make up.
That's a good lesson for all of us.
It's not a bad life lesson, right? I would say that's a big one. And they really dislike it when another individual rebuffs that chance to make up. You got to take the apologies.
The observation point that you just brought up, with the uniqueness of the setup at the Indianapolis Zoo now, are we having scientists come and observe on a regular basis, or will that be something that we're looking at down the road on a more scientific level?
But both, and we have scientists on staff now doing that, and that's actually underway. Right, already started.
You should talk about the Cognition Center because that's really cool too.
Yep. So my good colleague, Dr. Chris Martin, has been specializing in chimpanzee cognition for a number of years and did his graduate work at Kyoto University in Japan, although he's from the U.S. He also studies orangutans at the National Zoo. So brilliant scientist, and really made a very conscious effort to embed cognitive work with the apes, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the other thing, we wanted to consciously embed that in our programs overall for a number of reasons, but here's the big point. While we created a physical environment that's fantastic for chimpanzee physical behavior and social behavior, physical behavior, social behavior, mental health, psychological health, emotional health, all those things, I truly believe that it's critically important that you also attend to the intellectual health of great apes, certainly in a zoo setting, because they have powerful intellects. They are remarkably interested in everything in their surroundings, and their brains are particularly good at learning and problem solving. We can say that about our own species as well. We are extraordinarily good at learning and problem solving. So are chimpanzees. So are all the great apes.
And you started that with the orangutan.
Yeah, for me, that's been part of my career since 1994. When I started that program's still going with orangutans, where we do cognitive research on a touch-sensitive computer screen. We do that on a daily basis. So with a large community of chimpanzees, though, this has been envisioned differently. It is self-paced by the individual chimpanzees, meaning there are multiple stations all around the complex. And remember, we just opened, 6 weeks ago? No less, like 4 weeks ago. And the whole thing is some things are still evolving. Programmatic things are still evolving. So the opening was the starting gate. Now we start doing all the programming. So we have the ability to have dozens of computer stations for the great apes. Those are for the chimpanzees. Those are being installed over time. Most of them right now are based in one of the buildings, which is the cognition building. And the apes go up at their choice and work on cognitive tasks that turn on automatically on the computer stations. And they can choose which tasks they want to work on. And right now, of the 21 chimpanzees, and remember, most of them had no background ever doing it, or had never even seen a computer interface. Many of them. More than half are now working every day.
That's incredible. And I keep saying that in this whole show. We're going to call it the Incredible Chimpanzee Show.
That works. That works. We have one chimpanzee named Mara, M-A-R-A, who was the last chimpanzee in Puerto Rico. She came from a zoo in Puerto Rico that had been closed since 2017 due to hurricane damage. And she was alone for about a year before she came here to Indianapolis. So even though we don't have a detailed history on her, we know that at least since 2017, she wasn't using any computers because there was no electricity. And so there's no indication she ever had any access to computer screens. She's now one of the most motivated and most diligent individuals. And the other day, she worked for 90 minutes by her own choice, continuously.
Wow.
It's remarkable. Remarkable.
And the things that they're doing, you try to do them because you can walk up there.
Yeah.
There's interactive.
Yeah. There's places where humans can do the same tasks. Yeah. It's hard.
It's hard. It's
and they do it by choice. And I think that's what's important.
Sure.
I keep using the word crave because I think that's a fair word. And I'll use it in two more ways. I can't remember. I used it before about something. But here's the other ones. Chimpanzees, this is true for all great apes.
I think you said you crave reconciliation.
Oh, yeah. Craving exactly. Craving reconciliation. Perfect.
Yeah.
They crave mental stimulation. And I don't mean busy work. I mean learning and problem solving.
Sure.
They absolutely crave it. So it has to change continuously over time. You don't just read the same book over and over.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have new books. Otherwise, you don't want to do it anymore. And then the third thing I would say, talking about this word crave, which makes chimpanzees, one of the things that makes them so interesting, adult males absolutely crave the companionship of other adult males. That is really unique.
Culture.
They do. That is really unique. It absolutely does not happen with orangutans. Adult males are completely
Solo,
intolerant. Yeah, completely intolerant. Gorillas can be tolerant of other adult males, but it is not the same. Bonobos, there's some tolerance, but it's not the same. In chimpanzees, they crave companionship of other adult males. I would say, I think, in a different way than that happens for humans. Some human males do crave that, do love the attention of being around other adult males, but it is not universal.
True.
In the same way that it is for chimpanzees. And I still think it's different. Adult male chimpanzees just have a very different type of relationship, I think, compared to any of the other great apes, including humans. I think it's different.
I think we should backtrack just a little bit and explain quickly where the 21 chimpanzees came from. Because you mentioned Mara, but I get a lot of questions. A lot of people are interested. Where'd you get your chimpanzees?
Yeah.
It's not like we picked them up off the street. I mean,
it's a great point because, the history of chimpanzees in the United States is really interesting.
It's so different.
Yeah, it goes back decades and decades, and the brief way to explain it is that there have always been more chimpanzees in the United States than any other type of great ape. Always, hundreds. Sometimes there used to be thousands, and the majority of those chimpanzees were always here in biomedical research. That is no longer true. There is no biomedical research on chimpanzees anymore in the U.S., but that was not always the case. And there was a time when you counted the numbers in, more than a couple thousand. And there have also been chimpanzees in other circumstances. There have been chimpanzees in the entertainment industry, chimpanzees in private ownership, chimpanzees in private zoos, chimpanzees in private collections. So they've been sanctuaries. That's newer, of course, chimpanzees in sanctuaries. You find chimpanzees in all these different circumstances in the U.S. That is not true for gorillas. It is not true for bonobos. It is not true for orangutans in the same way that it is for chimpanzees, although historically all great apes were around. But the numbers have always been greater, exponentially greater for chimpanzees, likely because of access. They were, of course, historically always came from the wild. So more chimpanzees came into the United States, greater demand for them. And so the remnant of that, fast forwarding to today, is that you can still find chimpanzees in all of those circumstances, but the numbers have shifted. So the majority of chimpanzees in the United States today, numbering in the hundreds, maybe close to 1,000, are in sanctuaries. Big sanctuaries.
And what's the difference between a zoo and a sanctuary?
It's a great point. Two big differences. Sanctuaries generally have no or very limited visitation by guests, and sanctuaries essentially look to put themselves out of business. I know that's a weird way to say it, but they don't reproduce. They don't have any individuals reproducing. Let me give you a specific example. There is the largest chimpanzee sanctuary in the U.S., one of the largest is Chimphaven. They have hundreds of chimpanzees, around 300. I don't know the exact number, around 300. They're all retired from biomedical research. And that sanctuary is funded by the federal government. It's a great story because there was an enormous amount of biomedical research with chimpanzees that was federally funded historically. When that ended, there still was a commitment that needed to be made to those chimpanzees.
And they live how long normally?
Oh, gosh. The oldest chimpanzees anyone's ever heard of, and this is verified,
Sure.
would be like early to mid-70s.
Oh.
And people do debate that, but early to mid-60s for sure. Early to mid-70s.
So we have chimpanzees that could live quite a long time. That
Oh my gosh, yes.
Been retired.
Oh my
They
gosh,
needed a
yes.
place to go.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So when they go to the sanctuaries, that's a lifelong commitment for them with no reproduction. So eventually those sanctuaries will close. Mm-hmm. So you asked for the big difference. So that is not the same in the zoo community. Our job is to have a robust, healthy, self-sustaining population. And so we have very carefully managed reproduction that allows us to have, number one, great social groups and great social opportunities, but also a self-sustaining, genetically diverse population.
That also hopefully will spur others that see these healthy social groups and social populations to be active in conservation in the
absolutely.
wild. That's the whole point.
Oh, yeah, the whole point for us in a setting where we welcome guests is I'll even personalize it.
Okay.
I want people to come and see chimpanzees and understand authentically what they are. They're incredible. They're phenomenal. They're complex. They're amazing. And you have to see them in a normal social setting with opportunities for travel and learning and all that to give you that full appreciation. And then that translates, hopefully, into concern and development of a real conservation ethic. That you have to care about what happens to chimpanzees in the wild and, of course, in captive settings as well. You have to. And that is my real hope. That's what we do. And I know that it works. I know that it does. We've surveyed our visitors, in this case with orangutans, and we know when we apply all that same kind of idea, people are genuinely changed in terms of their conservation ethic. And this is honestly what is incredible to me. Sometimes after just one visit, sometimes, not every person, but for some people, after one visit, they have a change, and we go back and survey them later. It persists. It's enough to change their perspective permanently. It is a life-changing experience when you look eye to eye with a chimpanzee or an orangutan or any of the
And when
apes.
Arthur kisses you through the glass, it's so great.
Arthur is a wonderful
He's
adult.
so
man.
amazing.
Yeah.
I just love him.
Here's I want to circle back because luckily I didn't forget. Talking about that, you brought up some of the references that are so pervasive in our culture where people knew great apes from entertainment. Mm-hmm. People just call them the Clint Eastwood movies.
Clyde.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right Turn Clyde. That's what everybody says. That is such a painful thing for me to hear when people say that. That's their reference for what an orangutan is, because that's a horrible thing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And it's true for chimpanzees too, even more so for chimpanzees. But when you say that one incredible experience with a great ape can change your perspective forever. Now I circle back and I think about, it was every Saturday morning when there were shows with chimpanzees on them or a movie with a chimpanzee in it or whatever. Those perceptions are so enduring and so pervasive and frankly so damaging to chimpanzees that we really have to acknowledge that and correct it. We have those one incredible experiences, and with a live chimpanzee that you can see and see their behavior, and it's enough to change your perspective forever. And we're battling against people who have had years and years of inappropriate portrayals of what great apes are. But there is good progress. Most of those things people don't find acceptable anymore. people don't want to see those TV shows, don't
Right.
want to see those movies. I certainly didn't. I never let my kids watch them. Even though I grew up with them, I never allowed it. And so there is good news. There is good progress. But there's more to do. And I think the more people appreciate those animals and care about them and really understand them from what they are, there's nothing but good news comes out of that.
But then explain Planet of the Apes to me. Because you are a big Planet of the Apes movie guy.
Oh, I love that movie so much.
I know.
Now,
I know
sorry.
it's CGI.
Wait, no, I got to be
it's-
really. I got to go back and be really honest. It's probably not so great. Let me just be honest.
Okay.
First of all, let's be clear.
Uh-huh.
The original, the classic Planet of the Apes was the Charlton Heston
Sure.
version. That was all people in makeup. Okay?
Right.
They did, and a couple of them use infant chimpanzees. This was decades and decades ago. I still think that's one of it's one of my favorite science fiction movies ever. The original Planet of the Apes, of course, based on a book written by Pierre Boulle. A phenomenal.
I wish you could see his face right now. He is lit up. You're so excited to talk about this.
Well,
No,
but
I'm
here's the
happy.
thing.
It makes me happy.
It makes me happy too. But here's the thing. It's a great book, French author, and it was translated in English. But what most people don't remember, and they're never going to remember it now because the franchise has taken a very different turn, which I love. The original book was a comment on racism. That's what the book was about, really. And that's what the original movie's about. They were really to make sure people are thinking about the evils of racism. That was really what was the original intention. But nobody really pays much attention to that because the movies were so good that you take it for what it is and you forget what it's a metaphor for.
Okay, sure.
Those originals were classic and incredible. And let's really forget the Mark Wahlberg version. Sorry, Mark Wahlberg.
I didn't see the Mark Wahlberg version. I got to be honest with you.
You can skip it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's really bad.
All right.
It's really bad. And it took
Still makes a good hamburger, but go on.
Well, that's okay. It took the story and it changed fundamental elements of the story. Ultimately, to me, didn't work. But when this franchise came roaring back with the Andy Serkis CGI version, how absolutely unbelievable and incredible. What a phenomenal job they're doing. And that original movie now, the original one with the CGI version, a lot of that was based on real footage of chimpanzees who really did cognition work, for example. There are references in there you can see. When I saw that original movie, I know the video clips and the photos that they used to model those scenes on. I'm like, oh, that's that photo or that's that scene. That's when that chimpanzee did blah, 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 the real chimpanzee. So it was masterfully done. I love that there are no live great apes in this. This is all CGI. That is phenomenal. And where they're taking the movies is so great. And I'll circle back and say, at least in my mind, they're doing exactly what the Chimpanzee Politics book does. These are full, fleshed out characters and individuals with thoughts and desires and intellect and strategic thinking and you name it. And that's what people are now appreciating when they see these movies. It's not just a guy in a costume. I think people are forgetting that it's CGI.
And that these apes are really alive.
And the truth is,
if they could talk, that's what it would be like.
That I don't know, but I would say this: I like it. It works for me, and I'm super, super critical.
Yes,
and when I watch it, I think it works, and I think it's legitimate, and it doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't really stretch my imagination. I'm like, that makes sense. That would work. That's how it would go. I know that's odd.
No, that's a great review. Now I want to go see the movie.
They're absolutely phenomenal.
You're the expert. You're the scientist. If you think that.
Yeah, but what I love about it is they portray the apes as again, a fully fleshed out individual and character. It's not just a stereotype or comic relief or something like that.
And personality. They have personality.
They're real. It's just authentic. It's genuine. That's what makes it incredible. And of course, that was never true in any of the movies that ever used live apes.
Real ones, yeah.
I mean, they were always a stereotype or something to laugh at. which to me is just a painful thing to see. But that's what I love about these new movies. They've just done it so incredibly well. I'm already looking forward to the next one. I can't wait to see how they now blend it into the original.
Is that what they're doing? Like I said, I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm hoping.
Maybe they'll contact you and you can write for them.
I wish. I will say, and I guess this was a good thing. Oh man, I'm dating myself. So I'm on the Blu-ray version of the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes movie. I'm one of the extras at the end.
Oh, are you really?
So if you've got the Blu-ray, you can go find me at the end. So I did commentary at the end of the movies about the makeup and the authenticity of it and so on.
And yet you didn't like that version. That's interesting.
Here's the thing. The movie wasn't out when they filmed the commentary.
Did they pay you for it?
No.
Oh.
They provided some little clips and a little bit of information.
Oh,
Can you
see.
comment on this? So I hadn't even
Right.
seen the whole movie.
Yeah.
So my commentary might have been different, and they probably wouldn't have used it. But it was fun, and they did a really good job with the makeup, that's for sure. But yeah, the new CGI ones are incredible. I love them, and what I'm hoping is that it's moving towards now where it is now, the movie that's out this summer. In the future, they'll be moving towards what was the original one from the 60s with Charlton Heston.
That's the only one I've seen, I have to admit. And that was a long time ago.
You got a lot of movies to watch.
I know. We have another show to talk about movies, so that's going to come up some other time. But this chimpanzee show was only supposed to be 30 minutes, and look at us. We're going, I think it's an hour almost.
How long has it been?
It's almost an hour.
Come on now.
No, I'm not kidding. It's awesome.
You can cut a lot.
No, we can make it into two separate ones.
What's on your list? What did I forget?
Let's see. I don't think there's anything that you forgot because of the sanctuary and the movies. So you went back to that.
Here's what I will tell you one last thing. And of course, as you can tell, this is one of my favorite topics.
This is your passion, and that's what makes this so interesting for all of us.
We talk about it for a long time.
I know.
But I'll go back and say on a more serious note, as I mentioned, there are 21 countries in equatorial Africa where you find wild chimpanzees. It's, of course, the only place in the world in the wild. And I would also reinforce the fact, and this is another great topic for anybody that's interested, there are so many cultural differences among chimpanzees in the wild, both in terms of their behavior and tool use. Tool use is one of the better ways to look at cultural differences because there are artifacts associated with it from the tools. But that is phenomenal to think about. Chimpanzees across 21 different countries, cultural differences in every population that's ever been studied that's separate from another contiguous one. And every single chimpanzee population in the wild is endangered. And like for so many other, it's really about loss of habitat.
Forestry.
Yeah, it's loss of habitat. Irresponsible.
Farming.
Yeah, irresponsible stuff. There are some managed areas that are doing a very good job, but it's the irresponsible stuff. But here's what the average person can do, which is great, and people can be very intentional about this. If you recycle your phone, and now it's beyond phones, it's smartwatches or any of those small electronic devices. One of the minerals that you have to have is something called coltan in phones and all these small communication devices. And that has to be mined. And so that mining destroys pristine habitat. So the more and that of course includes chimpanzees as well as many other species in Africa. And most of the coltan is mined in Africa. So if you recycle all those devices, that coltan can be reused over and over again. It's like aluminum. You can just keep recycling it over and over. One of the great things about coltan is it can be found in all these things and immediately reused in new phones whatsoever, wherever. So I would say if you want to do something positive for conservation, that's really very easy. Don't keep your old devices in a drawer in your house somewhere. Don't give them to your kids to play with. It's not a throwaway item. Recycle it at an appropriate place, and you benefit wildlife for sure, and you benefit conservation, particularly of chimpanzees, if you do that. So I would encourage that. One other thing that's an emerging issue that's good to think about, if anybody's ever followed this with orangutans, it's the issue of non-sustainable palm oil.
Yes.
So that's a huge issue in Southeast Asia. So you always should use sustainably sourced palm oil or something with no palm oil. That's now becoming an issue in equatorial Africa as well, also South America. A good one to think about is focus on sustainably sourced palm oil or no palm oil, and recycle your electronic devices, and you benefit wildlife all over Africa when you do that, particularly chimpanzees. So they're the ones we're talking about today.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Great
And it's
advice.
easy.
Yes.
I mean, the recycling stuff's super easy, and probably everybody has a phone sitting in a drawer somewhere. And it doesn't matter, new or old phone, any of them. It could be the old brick phones or flip phones, anything. But dig them out, and it doesn't matter how long they've been sitting in there, the coltan's still recyclable. So drop them off at a good recycling center or at a responsible spot. And frequently, accredited zoos are great spots to do that. We are in Indianapolis, and boxes are clearly marked for electronic devices. It's a great, great, great thing for wildlife.
That's
and for
awesome. I did not
conservation.
know that.
Yeah.
I'm at that zoo almost every week.
We should-
I had no idea.
We should mention this on our podcast.
We just did. Thank you.
You
What a
bet.
great conversation.
I hope so.
Oh my goodness. Are
Thanks.
you kidding? Yeah. It's the chimpanzees, if you have a chance, get to Indianapolis and
Or
Indianapolis
any of
Zoo.
your good
Well, yeah.
local accredited zoo,
Lincoln
great
Park has
support.
some great
Oh my gosh,
chimpanzees. Oh my
phenomenal.
goodness.
Lincoln Park, Baltimore,
Yeah,
North
right.
Carolina, wonderful places. L.A. Lots and lots of, and I didn't think of all of them. Lots
No,
of great
of course not,
places.
but-
Support your accredited zoo and their chimpanzees. And depending on where you live, true in Florida, also true in Louisiana, you can support some incredible chimpanzee sanctuaries. Haven in Louisiana, Save the Chimps in Florida, and Center for Great Apes in Florida. They do the three biggest chimpanzee sanctuaries in the U.S., but there are some others. So depending on where you are in the U.S. or outside of the U.S., lots of great places you can support. You're doing a good thing when you support those places.
You're doing a good thing, Dr. Rob. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Your
you.
expertise is just amazing to me, and I'm fascinated by it.
Thank
and
you so much.
This conversation's been wonderful. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll check you out next time.
Thanks, Kristi. Well done.
You've been listening to Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker and Kristi Lee. If you like what you hear, please give a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best compliment. Thanks to our producers, Chris Spangle of Leaders and Legends, LLC. You can reach him at leadersandlegends.net. Also, thanks to Sophie Ritz. I'm Christopher Geisen. Thanks for joining us.